Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County live webinar on Professional Employer Organizations, Solution for Small Business Owners. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'm going to be your host today. Our presenters today are Bill Kemp and Mike Detuzzi. More on Bill and Mike in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a national organization with over 10,000 volunteers across the country. Locally here in SCORE Fairfield County, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services for small business owners. We offer one-on-one counseling, which can either be face-to-face, by telephone, email, or video. We offer about 150 educational seminars and workshops during the year. And thirdly, we have an extensive website with resources that also includes access to subject matter experts that you can help with a wide range of topics. You can also obtain free individual one-on-one counseling by going to our SCORE website and hitting Request a Mentor, or you can, the link's on the screen, and just hit that link for Mentor at SCORE. You can also find workshops there, and you can also find our webinars that are all up on YouTube, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Our next webinar is 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, November the 5th, when Don Wetmore, a time management expert, will talk about how to get a 26-hour day for real, and you can find more specifics on that on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. We are going to have a Q&A today. We've set aside questions or time for questions at the end. If you have a question, you can please use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen, and you can put your questions in at any point in time. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The webinar today is being recorded, and you can have access to that recording along with the PowerPoint materials that are there within the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, you can get access to that through our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, by going to Webinars on Demand. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Bill Kemp and Mike Detuzzi are currently with a business advisory firm, Insperity, a professional employer organization here in Connecticut. Both work extensively with C-suite executives and focus on company growth through internal operations and a suite of human capital management platform products and services. It's now my pleasure, and I'll turn it over to Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. This is Bill Kemp. How are you? Welcome to our listeners near and far, and thank you to SCORE for inviting us here today. I'm here with my colleague, Mike Detuzzi. Mike, say hi to the people.
Hi, everyone.
We are very excited to be here on behalf of Insperity, a PEO, a professional employer organization, and we're going to take this time here today to jump right into what exactly is a PEO in this world that Mike and I live in on a day-to-day basis. So here are our learning objectives for today. Small business settings, understanding a professional employer organization's benefits, limitations, and misconceptions. So what is a PEO, and what does it do, and what does it accomplish, and what are its limitations as a small business owner and medium-sized business owner, and should I be looking at one, and does it make sense? Learning objective number 2, how a revamped internal HR infrastructure is supported with external sources to streamline success. Mouthful. Yep. Otherwise, how can I outsource some of these day-to-day admin headaches and burdens out to other companies here in the county, here in the state? And third deliverable, understanding the difference between traditional human resources and human capital management. Well, that's how we'll end up today here on this podcast. So thank you again for inviting us on here. And with that, I'll toss it over to my colleague, Mike, and we'll jump right into it.
All right. So the concept of a PEO or co-employment is not new. It's been around for roughly 33 years and growing in nature. To the point where the IRS actually put a certification on a few of them through the Small Business Efficiency Act a few years ago in 2017. Insperity was the first PEO. Several have come before it, and now there's hundreds of them, some localized, some national, all sort of operating under a similar structure. But in short, a PEO basically enters into a fiduciary relationship as the keywords employer of record for tax remittance, buying power, and risk mitigation purposes. So as you can see with the Venn diagram that we've laid out here, there is the PEO, there's the client, and then the employees are a big piece of this, right?
Don't know. We've got sound here. I don't. Keep going.
Hello, can everyone hear?
Technical difficulties.
Okay. Technical difficulties sorted out.
Head on a swivel out there, people.
Thanks for sticking with us. So back to the diagram. We have the PEO, the client, and the employees are obviously a part of this. And so there's a service agreement that is entered into between the PEO and the client, and that creates the co-employment relationship. Essentially what this does is establishes a duality of employmentship or being an employer. And so the PEO is becomes the employer of record. And again, back to the statement up top. So they become the employer of record for, number one, tax remittance. Payroll is a major piece of this equation. The PEO is responsible for tax remittance and remitting the proper amount of taxes in the proper amount of time on behalf of the organization. A certified PEO also owns full responsibility for the remittance of those taxes. Additionally, they become employer of record for risk mitigation purposes, and such means that the PEO shares responsibility of having those employees from a risk perspective. And when I say risk, what I'm referring to is one, injury risk, meaning workers' comp, which people are mostly familiar with, and also risk of being an employer in general when it comes to employee claims, discriminations, lawsuits, things of that nature. And so the co-employer, the PEO, shares the responsibility of those actions. The client or the small business, small, medium-sized business, still remains the common law everyday employer. Nothing will change in their world as far as who they want to hire, who they want to fire, everything in between, their policies and procedures, what time they tell someone to come to work, what they tell them to wear, and such. And so there's really no difference or change in that world. The PEO simply takes some burden off of their plate for some of the duties that I previously mentioned. Additionally, to touch on this buying power, one of the major reasons why a lot of companies will decide to engage with the PEO is because of the buying power. You will get buying power for most notably health insurance and welfare insurances and ancillary insurances, and such that you are buying, the PEO is buying insurances on behalf of their size group or pooling effect, which would be different than the small business buying insurance on behalf of them and their size company. Most notably, their 15 or 20 employees, the PEO might be buying insurance on behalf of their 200, 300,000 lives. Now, some of the specifics around that and the why, as opposed to why somebody might enter into and engage with a PEO. Back to the better benefits for a minute, right? So small businesses and health insurance brokers are a little bit limited sometimes in what they can bring and the types of benefits, plans, and pricing that they can offer to a small business. That's just by law and by nature. And so a PEO might typically have relationships with carriers and access to carriers and plans that normally might be designated for larger organizations or enterprise level organizations. And so the small business can rely on the PEO to bring them solid benefit plans for their employees at rates that normally they wouldn't have access to. That's a major piece of it. Okay. Workers' compensation plans, coverage, claim resolution. Workers' compensation is another major pillar of the relationship. So there would the small business would move their workers' compensation insurance over to the PEO, which they would then take over, and then also share in the liability from an injury perspective. And so in the world of the small business running without the PEO, a workers' comp injury claim is something that's going to affect their coverage and affect their experience rating, and such could result in a higher experience rating, which means higher dollars paid to the insurance carrier. It's a little bit of a pebble in the ocean effect if they are a client of a PEO. An injury in that world is not nearly going to affect them as much as it would outside. It would affect the entire group. And so, boulder in the pond versus pebble in the ocean type of effect. And the PEO, since they share in the liability of owning the employees and the injury risk, it's also in their best interest to keep those environments as safe as possible. So you might often see the PEO helping to mitigate risk from an OSHA perspective, creating a safe environment for the employees, and such a safe environment and a lower cost environment for the employer. Employee recruitment, retention, and management. Oftentimes, the PEO takes a very large role in HR, human resources or human capital for the organization. Employee recruitment is an area where it's a little bit of sometimes a time suck for employers. They have a job opening. They've first got to create a job description for that opening. They then have to make job postings, get employees interested, do screening, do interviewing, and ultimately determine which is the best hire for their position. So the PEO can take a lot of those duties off their plate. They can help them to create the job descriptions. They can help to make those job descriptions comprehensive in nature and also compliant. They can help to do some of the screening. And then once an employee is onboarded and you have your employee base, you want to retain those employees, and you'll need to manage the employees on a go-forward basis. And such, the PEO, it can serve as an outsourced HR arm for the organization. There might be a sounding board in which you want to make sure that everything that you're posting is compliant. Your rules, laws, procedures, your handbook is compliant and is comprehensive and has everything that you need to remain compliant within the state or states that you operate in. Payroll, as I mentioned earlier, is another piece of the puzzle. Payroll, tax reporting becomes a bit of a commodity in the small business world. And so what the PEO might do is provide a technology platform for the employer to streamline their payroll operations, gather time, gather salaries together, and provide a resource and a technology to pay the employees and pay the tax and remit the taxes. The PEOs typically are not limited in the structure or the capabilities specific to certain payrolls when it comes to government compliance and government tax reporting. And so there's a comprehensive payroll platform that's included. Employer liability management and employment-related risk. So companies want to enter into a relationship so that they can lessen or reduce their risk exposure. PEOs know the laws of the land, and so they are a sounding board for the employers to ask questions around, what do I have to be aware of? What new laws are in my state that I need to know about? Unfortunately, in the world we live in now, sexual harassment has become one of the biggest topics for employers to be aware of. And so the PEO might be the one that helps to administer the training. There's also things such as, what to say, what not to say in an interview. Surprisingly enough, the majority of employee claims lawsuits come from not current employees, but prospective employees. And so employers need to be aware that there are people out there that are actively interviewing and are potentially, if they're not hired, they're going to point something out about why they weren't hired and what the employer might have said in the interview. And so it's a slippery slope for employers now in today's world, and to have a sounding board such as a PEO to either sit in on the interview or coach them on best practices is a valuable piece. And then lastly, relief from administrative duties that drain your valuable time and attention. So again, the PEO can be as much of an HR resource as you'd like them to be. The 5 essential elements of what's included, mentioned a few of them already, but number 1 is access to comprehensive benefit plans. Not only health insurance, but also ancillary insurances such as dental and vision, and welfare benefits such as life insurance, employer-paid life insurance, individual group life insurance, 401k, retirement plans, healthcare FSA and HSA programs, which are pre-tax savings vehicles for employees to pay for medical expenses, and additional large group type of benefit plans, such as EAP programs or employee assistance programs, which are kind of like concierge level counseling, free counseling services, and adoption assistance and education assistance and learning and development platforms. So not only medical benefits is a major piece of this, but employees would get access to certain types of benefit plans that they might normally get from a very large enterprise level organization. Number 2 would be relief from payroll and HR administration overload. I kind of mentioned this before, but the PEO would basically take over payroll processing, tax reporting, all deposits, any garnishments, paycheck stub history, W-2s, direct deposit, of course, and mostly in a technology platform. Number 3, HR government-related compliance. So things such as employment verifications, OSHA, unemployment claims. It's the PEO's job to monitor everything that's going on within the state and also the federal laws that could be affecting the business. And so they're typically very proactive in nature in reaching out to the clients to let them know what they need to be aware of. But additionally, they're always available and very knowledgeable about what's going on in case the employer asks. And mostly that comes free of charge. That's all included with the fees that normally outside of the PEO that an employer might call a legal attorney and ask for on retainer. Number 4, workers' compensation coverage and claim resolution. So the PEO covers for workers' comp. They would cover any safety programs, help with any claims, typically do everything up to sitting in court for a claim, and any return to work programs. Additionally, EPLI coverage, or employer practices liability insurance, is a piece of what most PEOs offer. That EPLI coverage is insurance in the in the instance that an employee claims for discrimination. And lastly, a go-to team of experienced HR professionals. Employee handbooks, training and development, leadership training, compliance training, employee relations support, EEOC investigation, any kind of reporting that needs to be done. And so PEOs are knowledgeable, and they have all the advice that you might need and guidance for sensitive employee-related issues. Now, back just on the bottom right-hand corner there, you'll see there's, as I mentioned before, there's hundreds of PEOs now operating in the United States, some national, some more just local. Again, the concept has really evolved over the years from the 33 years ago that they started. And there's approximately 175,000 businesses that engage with PEOs, and that encompasses over 3.7 million employees amongst all those clients. The growth rate is absolutely fantastic. Growth PEOs are up 14 times and growing by the day. And three major pieces or sort of different ways to look at a PEO versus the main pillars that I had already mentioned. Every employer wants to attract good talent, retain that talent, and develop that talent. A small business starts with an idea. The business owner takes that idea, the business grows, and in order to grow, you've got to add employees. Eventually, the business typically gets to a point where the business only goes as far as its employees take it. And employee turnover is one of the biggest killers of business momentum. And so it is essential for a PEO to help those small businesses attract good people through good benefit plans, through staying compliant, through building good cultures. And those are also ways that they help to retain that talent. Typically, employers that work with a PEO, the PEO is helping to build the culture of the organization. And such an employee is not typically going to leave the organization for better benefits down the road with the other guy, or they don't feel safe in the environment they're in. And so the PEO's responsibility is to help retain those people, and then ultimately develop them as well. You have organizations where they grow so fast that they end up just putting people in management positions because they were the best sales guy in the group. It doesn't always make the best manager. So the PEO can help to train and develop those employees into good managers, and ultimately that should result in better business success.
So now that we know what a PEO is from a high level bird's eye view, kind of jump into a few benefits, limitations, and misconceptions about the PEO space. Benefits, obviously, is Mike hit on most of these beforehand. The buying power, specifically from insurances, is essentially the number one benefit of a PEO. 90% of our conversations start with this benefit. We have the ability to move a 5-employee small business into a group of hundreds of thousands. The buying power by doing so, especially when we procure insurances, is just far different than what a small business can find in the open market. Another benefit is outsourced administration, administrative relief. Right? So no longer will an employee have to come to a business owner and say, hey, Bob, I lost my W-2. I lost my insurance card. My paycheck didn't come on time. These are such aspects that business owners don't want to necessarily deal with on a day-to-day basis. You think about a scientist in the biotech space. Their number one priority is exploring and developing their product. Not necessarily where their employee's W-2 or pay stub or insurance card is. And then another benefit is from the indemnification aspect. Mike mentioned earlier, not only from a workers' comp point of view, but also from the sexual harassment situation here in Connecticut. As of 10/1 is mandatory for all small businesses to have training for their employees from a sexual harassment perspective, and above and beyond the indemnification, FMLA, making sure discrimination and OSHA aren't knocking on the door. So just indemnification from checking the boxes on a compliance side as a small business here in Connecticut. Now, with that said, the PEO isn't perfect. It's not built for all types of businesses. There are limitations to the PEO. Number one, and Mike and I spend most of our time discussing the cost versus perceived value. The buying power is going to be there from insurances, but is there enough value in the HR components to really have this make sense for a business? We don't make sense for every business, and we'll be the first to say that. But if there is administrative needs and there are insurance needs, the PEO could be a conversation worthwhile of having. That is a limitation. It is, a PEO does cost the business money from a different PEOs work in different ways, but it's not free. Nothing is free, right? So is there enough value on the HR side to outweigh the buying power of insurances? Another limitation, and this is funny, we were joking about this beforehand, outsource admin. It's a benefit and it's a limitation. Unfortunately, you will have to rely on a group of individuals to make sure that payroll is delivered on time. If you as a small business owner were doing it through QuickBooks by yourself and you make sure that that's in-house and you want to keep that in-house, well, now you have to put trust into a third-party business to make sure those paychecks and your people are delivered on time. So it can be viewed as a benefit, but also a limitation depending who you speak with. And also fewer insurance choices. I'll speak on behalf of Insperity in particular. We work with one carrier. Other PEOs may work with one, maybe two carriers. So if you have a network that you are privy to, your doctor is only going to be accepted by this carrier, you may have to have a difficult conversation when it comes to insurances. But most importantly on this page, one takeaway, if you are going to take one thing away, is the misconception of control and direction. In Insperity in particular, the PEO does not have the means to run the day-to-day aspects of every business. We are not hiring, we are not firing. We will offer best practices in doing so, but as Mike mentioned earlier, we're not going to tell you who to hire, who to fire, what to wear, what time to show up. We're just providing the infrastructure per se to do things correctly and make sure everything is bundled up. But entering the picture as the employer of record, it's just fiduciary. It's just for tax remittance purposes only. So we can have that buying power for insurances and workers' comp, and we can provide the shield per se for indemnification from other insurance aspects. I wanted to pause here and say, define HR in your own head. But for the purposes of time, we'll keep moving here. HR is an archaic term used to describe management and development of employees in an organization. I want to head back to that term management. Historically speaking, HR, when I hear the word management, I think of someone herding cattle into a ring and just making sure that they're where they need to be. And that's good and fine. But what Mike and I and the PEO space are challenging small business owners to do is view human resources as a human capital strategy, a people strategy. Your people are your most important asset. Your people are the most important and valuable thing, quality, or aspect to any small business. Very often we'll cross a business owner and say, our HR is pretty lean. Things are running pretty smoothly. For an example that I just crossed this morning, I was meeting with a small business owner here in Connecticut, and he said, there's some top tier salespeople, some mid tier and low tier. Well, yeah, you pay your individuals on time. They have insurance, and very often here in Connecticut, that's where HR stops. But when we start to shift and challenge the definition and look at human resources as human capital, well, did you provide a DISC assessment to those mid-tier sales reps? Can you alter your recruiting process to attract more of the top-tier sales reps? Can you implement some type of training to the mid-tier and low-tier sales reps to boost them internally? So what can you do to provide your people with more resources to achieve the top tier sales reps and achieve what they want to accomplish. So I would hope, very often, I would hope that you're paying your people on time. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does happen. But for this argument's sake, we'll say that it does. But once we start to challenge the archaic definition of human resources, start to view it as a people strategy, which is something you want in place ahead of time. We want to be proactive about this. We want to provide specific feedback and review and communicate with your employees so they can develop internally. We want this feedback to be challenging. We want it to be written. We want it to be specific. We want it to be measurable with a deadline. So once you start viewing your people as your most important strategy, we can start to really talk about the shift in just managing your people, making sure they come on time, making sure they're paid, to, okay, how can we start to develop this talent? And as I mentioned earlier, I'll start on the bottom of this slide. There's 3 base layers in our world for an effective HR strategy. The very bottom, the base layer of any business, right, is making sure your employees are paid on time. That's transaction driven. We want to make sure the payroll is there. We want to make sure it's delivered on time, and your people are the Friday, biweekly or weekly payroll or monthly payroll, it's there for them. The next tier up, though, is event driven. It's hiring, firing, enrolling in benefits, employee pay changes, job function changes, management training. Everything is event driven. The different types of internal shifts and movements within a business. And very often, that is where HR stops for small businesses in Connecticut. They're paid on time, they're hired appropriately, their I-9 is verified, and they enroll in benefits, and then go out and do your job. But we're challenging, the PEO space is challenging small businesses here in Connecticut to take a look at that top tier, the outcome driven. How do we want to achieve a specific outcome, like lower turnover, which is a box of worms, right? It's bundled. How do we increase sales? How do we increase our service results? How do we start to view HR as more than transactional driven, as more than event driven? And how do we start to view HR as a profit center? That's the key word here in these 3 layers, is how do we start to shift this mentality around HR? And that's a conversation that in our webinar is really difficult to convey. But think internally, think with your business owners, think with your employees. Are you providing them with the tools that they need to succeed above and beyond their day-to-day job descriptions? And this is a really powerful quote from our internal team. Mike mentioned this earlier. Every employer wishes to contain costs. That's pretty straightforward, right? No employer says, you know what, I'm going to go spend some money on things I don't really need today. That doesn't set anyone up for success. Every employer wishes to retain and develop top talent. No employer wakes up and says, you know what, I'm going to go hire the worst employee in this applicant pool. That sounds like a great idea. And every employer wishes to offer top benefits. Every employer wishes to offer benefits to take care of their people. Here in Connecticut in particular, if you are under a certain size, the state is limiting your ability to offer top benefits. Now, I mentioned top benefits. I'm talking Fortune 500 benefits that only large businesses have access to. The state is doing an incredible job offering what they can. But a PEO allows small businesses to tap into Fortune 500 benefits, Fortune 500 resources, and really revamp their internal structure. So I thought this would be a nice way to kind of segue into, wrapping everything up and bundling it. What is a PEO? We know what it is. It's an agreement between a small business and a service in terms of the employee. We know what it is. We know why businesses enter into a PEO agreement. We know its benefits and limitations, and we know why, essentially why we would enter into this type of agreement. Every business wishes to have these benefits. A PEO really revamps and provides access to these types of deliverables.
Sure, and just to wrap things up with a quote from our CEO, Paul Servati. Paul helped found the PEO industry 33 years ago. Is a staple in the market and is still our CEO and leading the charge today. And Paul, in his recent book called "Take Care of Your People," says we are built, designed, and structured to help take the lid off of businesses, to remove inhibitors, and to provide tools and catalysts for growth and success. And to kind of wrap it up with our mission statement as a company, which I think flows pretty well to most PEOs, but it is near and dear to our heart and home here at Insperity, is our mission statement is to help small businesses succeed so that communities prosper. And we believe that if we do our part in helping a small business to create solid cultures and attract and retain and provide benefit plans that create happy employees and happy, healthy families, that then so the business will succeed as a result of all that.
Okay, thanks, Mike and
Bill,
Bill.
we
We
have
have some time left for questions here. Just as a reminder, if you have a question, please submit it in the chat feature. And maybe while people are submitting their questions, actually, I have a couple that maybe I'd like you to elaborate on, if you like. Can you talk a little bit more? I think, Bill, in your remarks, you mentioned about costs and not for everyone. Can you maybe talk a little bit on how costs or fees are structured by PEOs and whether there's a threshold number of employees or size of business where it might be appropriate?
Absolutely. And Mike, feel free to chime in. I'll keep this as agnostic as I possibly can. The PEO space, it depends on which provider you are entering into an agreement with. Some PEOs charge per se on a percentage of payroll. Some PEOs charge on a per employee per month basis, which is how Insperity enters into the picture. We are on a per employee per month basis. So there's different types of costs perspectives, but we always like to say we keep in mind that we're also revamping the insurance picture as well. So Mike and our goal is to offset enough on the medical costs per se to outweigh or at least make it a feasible picture for the HR charges, the payroll charges, the service team charges, the training and development, at least make it a worthwhile conversation to have.
And I think the other piece of the question, if I heard it correct, was size of company and sort of the limitations there. I could sort of speak for every PEO here. As long as you have at least 2 employees, there is a possibility for a group health insurance plan. Does it make sense at that level? Possibly. Insperity tends to limit our threshold at 5 employees at the small level, and we could technically go up to 5,000 employee companies. Our real sweet spot, and the sweet spot for most PEOs, is anywhere between the 20 and 75 employee mark, and those organizations tend to have little to no HR support in-house. They might have one person handling HR, they might have one person wearing the HR hat by default, and thus that's the reason for sort of the sweet spot as far as employee count.
I have a question from Elliot. Can PEOs help with green card and immigration type issues? Have you run into that kind of help?
I don't believe so. Most PEOs are not internationally based. Most are state or federally based internally. Particularly, Insperity has an international partner that we work with that can help with international relations and also if they do have any employees outside of the United States. But typically speaking, for ourselves, we don't handle those matters.
And I'll say the only thing, it's getting a bit more narrow and specific from an onboarding perspective, the only item that Insperity in particular cannot handle from an onboarding a new employee is verifying an I-9. that still falls on the employer's shoulders to check the box from a license and passport perspective or green card, what have you. But in terms of the paperwork and the templates is all streamlined with the PEO.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. You talked about a wide range of benefits that PEOs can offer. Can you help out employers with daycare benefits at all? Do you have any ability to do that?
Yeah, great question. So there is such thing called a dependent care FSA, and certain ways for employees to have pre-tax dollars taken out of their paycheck to pay for things such as that for daycare and also adult care and everything in between. So yes, that is one of the benefits associated with the PEO.
Okay, thanks. Say as a reminder, if the participants out there, if you have questions, please put them into the chat feature. We have lots of time today. Again, another one. You talked a little bit about liability benefits being transferred to the PEO. Can you elaborate a little more on which ones actually transfer and there's indemnity versus which ones that the employer would actually retain and you help mitigate? Because that's a sense that I got.
Sure, I think I answered the question the right way. So since there's an agreement between the employer and the PEO to share the liability of having those employees, there is shared responsibility, and any kind of claim, call it a workers' comp injury claim, or call it an employee discrimination or lawsuit, or any kind of claim of that nature, is taken care of by the PEO first and foremost, as long as they take our advice. If in most cases, if the advice is not taken or requested, then typically the employer is still on their own for what happens after that. So that's why a key term I say share. We don't take full responsibility for owning the employees, but we do help to sort of mitigate the risk associated with any kind of claims of that nature.
Yeah, and I'll say that a lot of the co-employment and the risk mitigation and indemnification falls on the types of insurance of actually being an employer. Now, general liability, E&O insurance is for some, for example, if an architect is under suit for not delivering on a type of project or what have you, that does not fall under the PEO umbrella, because we provide insurances for being an employer, not in terms of the employer going out and doing their job effectively.
Yeah. Thanks. I think that's a clarification. Very, very helpful. Another question here on, do you have some recommended ideas for retaining critical employees? You talked a lot about retention, attraction, retention. Small businesses have critical employees, and what are best practices there in terms of retaining?
Sure. So I think it's crucially important I throw this word culture out there. It's kind of a broad term, and oftentimes you ask somebody to define culture or an employer culture, and it's tough to define. It's sort of one of these things that is just tough to put into words. We have a great culture here, or I don't like the culture here, or whatnot. And I think, but so one of the things our CEO says is you either have a culture by default or you have a culture by design. And what that means is that, as your business grows, and if you don't focus on the employee piece of it, and you're just kind of focused on moving the business forward through your vision, and you might have a mentality of, I'm going to lose people and next man up. You're probably going to have a culture by design. It just sort of, by default, it's just sort of going to happen. But if you specifically focus on wanting to build a culture and build a happy employee, and
this is not.
No.
Cannot hear you.
You can type a message in the meantime. Technical difficulties or something of the sort.
Cannot hear. Yeah.
You're putting Bob's pushing. He types faster than I do.
Can you reshare that thing?
No?
Like share the screen?
Can you reboot the router or just try to get right back up?
Yeah, we're back up.
Okay.
All right. Technical difficulties. I think.
Back in action here.
Yeah, we were talking amongst ourselves there. So to continue my point, one of the other areas where we focus on is the an employee performance review process or performance appraisal. Oftentimes that becomes a check the box activity for employers. They say we've got to do it, and we've got to just kind of do a check-in to see where you're at. But that could be a real culture builder and a real inhibitor for business success if done properly. Employees see value in it because they see that as an opportunity to potentially get a raise. And employers should see value in it because they should see that as an opportunity to get feedback from the employee on what's working, what's not working. And also help to develop some employees from there and develop ways to help the employee grow within the organization. And that's how you develop loyal employees, and that's how you develop ways for employees to help you build your culture internally. So we think those are great ways, and we provide, as well as some other PEOs, provide a full learning and development platform that is fully available within the PEO structure and costs. And that learning and development platform ranges in topics and courses anywhere from basic computer level skills to leadership development skills to personality tests, so that you can figure out how employees can work better together. So those are all good ways, I think, to sort of build the culture.
Yeah, and Mike mentioned earlier our CEO just released a book. This isn't a shameful plug here, but the book title is "Take Care of Your People," and taking care of your people goes above and beyond, a nice workspace or a foosball table or company lunches. Don't get me wrong, all of that is fantastic, but truly taking care of your people, taking care of your employees and their families and their children, we need to start to think above and beyond the quote unquote cool aspects of a company.
Great, good dialogue around the culture issue, and apologize for the technical difficulty there that we dropped. Maybe a more tactical one on the employment side. Do you help with background checks on recruiting?
Yes, we do, and I think it's very important to you just spent a lot of time, money, and resources to recruit for an open position. The last thing you would want to do is have something come up later on that then you have to get rid of that employee and start the whole process over again. And who knows how much money and time was just spent and wasted there and training and developing that employee. So we think it's very important to run background checks on new employees, and that is a piece of what we offer and what we know that other PEOs offer within the platform.
Okay, we don't have any more questions at the moment. I just wonder, Bill or Mike, is there any areas that you want to cover before we just touch on it at all before we leave?
Yeah, I just want to say is shameful plug for the PEO industry as a whole. I've been in the industry for roughly 13 years myself, and I think that so I'm an advocate for the industry as a whole. I mean, if you were to choose Insperity, great for us, but I think there's no better way for a small business to help themselves kind of grow through the guidance and the abilities of what the PEO can offer. And so if you haven't already, or you think you might be a fit, or even if you just, simply offer your employees benefits today, I would say engage with a PEO and find out what it might entail, how it might help you grow your small business.
Yeah, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, we aren't the right fit for every business, nor will we force this relationship. Insperity in particular, and PEO spaces in particular, we're not transactional driven. I learned a long time ago, we're not trying to sell the PEO, right? It has to be the stars need to align a little bit, and there needs to be some value from a business owner's point of view for this to make sense. But as Mike mentioned, it's worth a conversation. It's worth, hey, here's potentially a better mousetrap that's out there that could make sense for my business. Let's kind of explore and at the very least just have a conversation with us or another PEO just to see what we're about. But we really appreciate all of the listeners here and the questions. They were great questions, and really just taking the time here out of your busy days, and obviously for SCORE for having Insperity and Mike and I here. Very much appreciated.
Great, thanks very much. That's we're going to wrap things up today, and just a reminder that this webinar and the materials will be available within the next day or two on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. You can go to webinars on demand and watch the replay. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today at noon, Tuesday, November the 5th, and we have a time management expert, Don Wetmore, presenting on how to get a 26-hour day. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our live webinar today. Please fill out your evaluations that will be sent at the end of this session. They're very helpful to us. And in closing, thank you very much to Bill and Mike for their comprehensive presentation today. And if you do want a mentor, again, the links are on the screen, or you can do our website. You can also find our calendar of workshops on the website there. And so in closing, have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.